Mr. Randall, you just want me to say Mr. Randall at the end when I say thank you?
Thank you, Mr.
Or is it C. Curtis Randall?
D.
D. Curtis Randall. I always want to say, okay. Oh, this is Daniel.
Hi, Dan.
This is Mr. Randall.
How are you? Good.
D. Curtis. He has his own show, so he comes in, our usual regular engineer. I guess Alex is not here today.
I don't know much help I'm gonna be on the privacy policy question.
Which one? Which
Privacy
question?
Privacy policies. Just the.
So what did you want me to cover? What is the scope, what is the scope of privacy law? That's
Yeah,
okay?
we're all just talking about the privacy law, and I'll like.
Definition of the Privacy Act, do you, in your own words, basically, or you don't wanna,
No, I could do that.
okay?
You-
Freedom
you-
of Information Act,
Yeah, good.
summarize that. So what are you saying, what privacy?
I'm saying there's a question in there about privacy policies, right, for small businesses?
Oh, yeah.
Was there a question? The thing is, it's like, there's like a lot of, I can talk about the.
So when we visit the website, there's often a privacy policy statement. What does that mean?
It means that that website has made the decision to list some things they're gonna do and not do with your data, but.
Oh,
it's-
yeah, see, stuff like that.
Yeah.
That's it, that's all you have to say.
Okay.
It's because it's a conversation, it's just with people who are just standard, who need to just briefly know, so that's sufficient,
Okay.
okay? Oh, I see what she said, does it have to do with data collection?
I mean,
Oh, yeah, I guess it can deal with data collection, where they take your personal information or your credit card information.
there's different obligations in those cases, and there's different like ways of ensuring that. So the law is generally one part of like a bigger puzzle.
Oh, okay. So that might just be too in-depth for them. So I should just stop at this, what is the privacy policy, what does that mean?
I mean, if you want to include that, you ask me any question you want. If I-
Is the cookies pop-up a privacy issue?
It is a product of companies trying to do business in Europe. So that's a requirement in Europe, but it's not a requirement in the United States. So.
But why do, okay,
So cookies generally are used for all different kinds of stuff when you're on the internet, ranging from stuff that a website needs to operate on the short term to longer term, like tracking. Like sometimes cookies will be used to follow someone's behavior and build a profile that can then be sold to an advertiser. And
so that's the only thing people need to know.
Okay.
Yeah. You know what I'm saying? So you don't have to, like, that can be the only thing that they need to know, that it kind of tracks you.
Yeah.
For advertising purposes.
More or less, yeah.
Yeah.
And some of it is routine stuff to maybe make your life a little easier, like so you don't have to type in your password every time you visit a site, or so they save some of your preferences, like if you have
Is
preferences.
that cookies?
Yeah.
Oh, see, stuff like that. I didn't even know that was, I know that they say, you know, we use cookies, do you authorize us to use cookies or whatever? But I didn't realize when they ask, do you want us to save your preference? Like Google says, do you want us to save your preferences? I didn't realize that was cookies as well.
Well, browsers may do it differently, but in some cases, like persistent, like if you like close your browser and then open your browser back up and you're still logged into a website, that's a cookie with staying on.
Okay. Okay. Anything you didn't want me to cover?
No,
I have a
no.
question. Okay, but it's just a conversation, and I trust me, I follow up. So, put your radio. Good afternoon, Chicago. Welcome to the Miss Esquire radio show on Urban Broadcast Media. I'm your host, Liz Murray, and thank you for tuning in to another episode. Don't forget to tell your friends and family about our show. Please share. What else? Where else can you get valuable and free legal advice on a variety of topics? The goal of the Miss Esquire radio show is to educate, inspire, and entertain you, whether it's regarding the division of marital property, what to do and say during a traffic stop, or how to complete the required documents to start a business. Our show is here to help. On another note, can you believe the weather we're having? You better get ready for the cold and snowy winter, Chicago. It's coming, and it is definitely coming, because I don't know whether to have a coat on sometimes or just a jacket, because it's just been so unpredictable. We have a lot to cover today, but first we need to thank our sponsor, the Duranian Law Group. This Chicago-based real estate law firm assists residential and commercial real estate sellers and buyers from contract to closing with no upfront payments. Thank you for your continued support of the show. Today we are focusing on privacy law, technology, and the Freedom of Information Act. Leading the discussion is attorney Daniel Masalia. He earned his JD, his Juris Doctor, from Chicago Kent College of Law. I think we need to do a woo.
What's up?
Because he's a fellow Chicago Kent grad. We love our law school. He is also an attorney at the First Defense Legal Aid, but you also have your own law firm, which is Daniel Masalio Esquire.
Daniel, I have to push back on the pronunciation of my name.
Yes.
Masolia.
Masolia. You know what? And I wrote it down, and I've been doing this. I've been chopping up not just your name. It's been quite a few guest names that I have been chopping up. So it's Masolia.
Masolia.
Masolia. And you know what? For the viewers, when I met Daniel Masolia, right? I said it right?
Yeah.
Masolia,
Thank
right?
you. Yeah.
But I was pronouncing it Masoglia because of the spelling. So I was using that kind of an English pronunciation, and I'm assuming, are you from America?
Well, I want to say thank you for having me on the show. I'm really pleased to be here. And
Yes.
I'm looking forward to our talk. When we met, we were working in the same office, and she was calling my dad, actually, because I was in the emergency room, and he probably
Yes.
had heard that pronunciation like all the rest of them. I'm from North Carolina. The name is Italian.
It's Italian. Okay, wonderful. Because my last name is Darko, my maiden name, just in case my husband is listening. My maiden name is Darko because my father's from Ghana.
Cool.
Yeah, so I know what it's like to chop up, somebody to chop up the name. Okay, so I'm sorry for chopping up your name.
You're forgiven.
Thank you. Masalia.
Masolia.
Masolia. Let me see this. How could I put it?
Like
Solia.
Masolia.
Masolia.
Okay.
So we'll go back to that. We'll go back to that later. Okay. So Daniel is a writer. You're a freelance writer, including you've written for The Atlantic. You are a lecturer on privacy-related topics, so you do that maybe twice a year. And you're an active member of the National Lawyer Guilds of Chicago.
That's
Welcome
right.
to the show, Daniel.
Thank you so much for having me.
Okay, so we're gonna, and Daniel, of course, told you that we had met on a contract assignment. We both do contract work. It's kind of like hustling. Like you're a freelance writer, you have your own law firm, then you're an attorney with the First Defense Legal Aid.
Mm-hmm.
So, you're doing a whole bunch of hats. So we met doing a contract assignment.
We met it was the first night Liz and I had ever spoken, and she ended up saving my butt. Can I say butt on the radio?
Yes, you can say butt on the radio.
Okay. She ended up saving my butt because
I didn't save his butt. I was just there for him. That's it.
she showed up.
Yeah.
And that was really cool of her.
Oh.
I have bipolar disorder, and so I was on my way to the emergency room, and who is it but Liz Darko with her arm around me, walking me to Darko Murray, walking me to the ambulance, and then calling my dad from the emergency room, which she totally didn't have to do, and now having me on a radio show to talk about privacy and the internet.
Yes, and you didn't even have to mention all of that, but I noticed that, when you talk about the bipolar disorder, what I'd like is you being brave enough to talk about it, because I have a history of mental illness in my family.
Hmm.
My mother and my aunts also suffer from depression and a bit of schizophrenia.
Hmm.
So, you know what I mean? It's one of those things that some people can be embarrassed about, but it's something that really needs to be talked about because it's real. It's real everywhere we go, whether it's diagnosed or undiagnosed. So I'm glad that you mentioned that, and for all of our listeners who are tuning in to Miss Esquire, there are privacy issues behind that. We probably won't cover that. That'll be another show. But those are concerns that you may have when you're in a work environment, and what does it mean to you? Is that something you have to disclose at a work environment?
Mm-hmm.
So we'll talk about that on another day, but just know that we are here for you regardless, because everyone is great. All of our listeners are great, and all of our viewers, say hi. We have people on YouTube for Urban Broadcast Media who suffer from that. But yes, I did not save his behind. I was just there for a young man I didn't know, who I could tell was a sweet, sweet person, and now I know you're like brilliant. Your mind is brilliant, so I'm happy to meet you. Okay, so since the scope of privacy law is so large, today I think we should just cover how privacy affects business owners and the internet. First though, how did your passion for privacy, security, and the First Amendment form?
So, privacy affects everyone, and my passion for the topic came about as a result of when I was in law school. I got involved with, I'd always told myself, if anything like the civil rights movement or the anti-war movement happened in my lifetime, I would join it. And at that point, it was 2011, Occupy Wall Street seemed to me to be something similar to those movements and to that period of resistance and social unrest. And so I jumped into activism during my first year of law school and my second year of law school, and since have made it a focus of my practice and my life. And so it started becoming clear that there are a lot of ways that political expression and everyday, just where you travel and where you walk and the things that you do, how allowing a third party like the government or like a corporation to, going in and out a little bit, to have access to that information that can drastically change how your life works, that can drastically change whether or not you're able to exercise your constitutional rights, and that can drastically change whether or not you're able to get an abortion or buy a firearm, or live a life free of surveillance from the other people in it. And so this sort of dovetailed with some coursework that was offered at my school, and Chicago Kent has an excellent sort of internet focused program there. And to wrap up this lengthy answer, I found activism, saw the connection between privacy and free expression and the internet, and then started studying it there at school.
Okay, so when the people have issues regarding freedom of expression, if there are civil rights issues going on with them, do you consider yourself a civil rights attorney? Is that how we classify you, as a civil rights attorney?
I would say a Freedom of Information Act attorney.
Okay.
Because there's a whole realm of civil rights law that is way beyond the scope of my understanding.
Okay.
And so that's like when you see people suing, like a police department, for example, for pattern and practice of discrimination, violating police brutality, stuff like that. That's what we would, I guess, like what I would consider to be like civil rights.
Okay.
But that's not to say that what the work that I do doesn't touch on civil rights, because privacy, although it's not strictly in the Constitution, there's no right to privacy written in, like there is a right, like freedom of speech. There's no guarantee to privacy beyond the Fourth Amendment, which is both broad and limited, which maybe we'll get to. But there is, I forgot your question, Liz.
No, you were just talking about whether you were deemed as a civil rights attorney.
Oh, no, I wouldn't say I'm deemed as a civil rights attorney. I'd say civil rights attorney is people suing for police brutality or directly at free expression issues. And some of the work I do touches on that, but I would say I'm
freedom of information or internet lawyer.
Yeah.
You like that?
I try to avoid titles.
Okay. Oh, you try to avoid titles.
Yeah.
Okay, well, would you have to be in some category?
I have
if somebody
civil.
says, they say I just want to civil. Okay, but you do civil and criminal.
I've represented activists on a very short scale.
Oh, awesome. That's good to know. Okay, so we're gonna talk about just the scope of privacy law. Like, just give us just a small definition of the Privacy Act, because the Privacy Act is this great big rule of law. So what is the Privacy Act, like for our listeners to just understand what falls under the Privacy Act?
So the Privacy Act itself is fairly narrow. It was a result of post-Watergate concerns about how the government was using people's information. And the Privacy Act relates only to information in federal agencies held about individuals. So it doesn't apply to state governments, it doesn't apply to the local police department, it doesn't apply to a lot of
us as individuals.
People as individuals, and the concern is for the misuse of our data that may come it gives a person a right to make sure that a federal agency isn't misusing their data.
Okay, so the Privacy Act only covers acts of the federal government?
Federal agencies specifically, yeah.
Okay, so if there's some threat of the federal agency misusing
Mhm.
our information, our personal information, like wiretapping our homes.
Well,
Like when we watch a TV.
wiretapping is gonna be, there's this distinction in privacy law that often comes up, and it's like there are vastly different worlds with law enforcement and when national security is involved, and then when law enforcement and national security aren't involved. And so wiretapping is a good example of a place where there's not an intersection of these two acts, because the Privacy Act has written into it specific exemptions for law enforcement operations. And so if you're concerned about like a wiretap, and you want to know like how the process for a federal application for a wiretap would work, you're going to look to a law called the Electronics Communications Privacy Act.
Okay. Just give us just one example of when we as individuals would look to the Privacy Act. Just an example.
You're concerned that the Department of Veterans Affairs is misusing your information to run a scheme where they sign up for credit cards in your name.
Okay.
And you can bring a cause of action, you can get a lawyer and file a lawsuit over that. You can also request clarification of how your information is being used.
Okay, that helps. Okay, so what is the Freedom of Information Act?
The Freedom of Information Act sort of flips the question on its head. The Freedom of Information Act looks at all this information that government has about itself, essentially. And says, how can a member of the public get information from the government about itself?
Okay.
And it's funny that this comes right on the heels of the Privacy Act, because the two of them are right next to each other in the United States Code. This is very nerdy, but I'm just going to say it very briefly.
Okay.
Section 552A and Section 552 are those two laws.
Okay.
They're like right next to each other. But the Freedom of Information Act is a more broad right of the public federally to request information about just about anything from any federal body. You could write them an email and say, I'd like information about the sale of a car.
Okay.
You could say, I'd like information about a relative who served in the military. You could say, I'd like my own FBI file. You could say,
Can I get Trump's tax return?
you could
Does that fall in the Freedom of Information Act?
Well, it would be covered by the Freedom of Information
Okay.
Act, but then it's sort of an exchange. It's a conversation that happens between the member of the public, which is called the requester, and the public body or the public
Okay.
agency. And so they would say, you say, I want Trump's tax returns, and privately I'm thinking, me too. But if
Right, but the Freedom of Information, I should have freedom of information. I should
Right.
be able to get that. That should be.
I'm going to say that it's going to be exempt from disclosure
Okay.
because it would violate personal privacy, or because
Okay.
it violates the federal law or something. And so it's not like a series of box ticking, but it is a fairly easy process to start, at least, to start trying to get that information.
Okay, all right. And then can anyone, well, we had talked about that basically, can anyone request information under the Freedom of Information Act? So we all can.
Absolutely.
Yeah, there's no prohibition.
Absolutely, and
Yeah.
there's great guides online if you're interested in starting to send a FOIA request. Some of them are designed for journalists, but the Reporters Committee for Freedom of the Press runs a great FOIA resource if you want to do some of this stuff without a lawyer, because the act can be fairly complicated. And then also, every agency should have online its own FOIA page where they have an address, instructions on how to send a request, and I think the types of information that the body keeps. That's the case in Illinois. Illinois' version of this law, each public body lists the information that it has. I'm not sure if federally they do that too, but I think they do. And so you can do a little bit of searching and get a good start on information for whatever your pleasure may lie.
Okay. And then, what are the biggest freedom of information issues today?
I would say federally the biggest freedom of information issue is the backlog. there's a requirement in the act that a response should be made in 20 days.
Mhm.
And practically speaking, just that is never the case. You hear over and over that it takes years sometimes for people to receive information from their requests. And although this is a violation of the law, there's not a whole lot of judicial relief available to people who feel like they should have their documents faster.
Okay.
I would say that's one of the biggest issues. Another issue is navigating the technical challenges that are accompanied by the proliferating use of email and the way that public agencies use email. Another issue is sometimes, the government is not always acting in good faith, and sometimes it acts in very bad faith about these issues. A client of mine won a lawsuit this past year against a city of Chicago agency, the Board of Education, about Chicago Public Schools about Chicago Public Schools former principal Troy LaRaviere. And in that case, they ignored essentially requests for months and months and months, and then it turned out that we got an email of them mocking my professional biography. It turned up in discovery.
Okay.
Yeah, when we won the case, so you don't have to
Okay.
get so distressed. But there's a
The
lot.
city of Chicago.
City of Chicago. There's
Who's doing this?
employees of Chicago Public Schools, yeah. And,
Oh, wow.
And so there's a lot of discretion for an individual to violate the law if they want to.
Okay, so you deal with people who are trying to acquire information from agencies. Now, we talked about federal agencies, so Chicago Public Schools is here, our state agency.
That's right.
So the Freedom of Information Act is on a federal level, but each state has its own FOIA?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, okay. So here we have our own FOIA law where we can go to our state agencies or municipalities
Yeah,
and we can get information from them.
right. You can request the mayor's office, you could request the Department of Planning and Development, the Department of Transportation,
Mm-hmm.
Governor's Office, Parks District.
Oh, wow. So if I wanted to find out with the mayor, the salaries of the mayor and everything, that's a part of the Freedom of Information Act. I should be able to acquire that information. The salary for all the governmental officials, what's being paid through Chicago Public Schools, with all of their employees and things like that. I can find that out.
Yeah, the City of Chicago runs a really great resource called data.cityofchicago.org.
Mm-hmm.
And they have information about not only the history of FOIA requests, but also the salaries of most, if not all, city employees available there publicly.
Okay, because we're about to go to short commercial break, so we'll be coming back soon from the short commercial break. But I want people to understand, because I think for me as an individual, it's like, well, what information would I want to get from the government? So I guess for our viewers, you may have something an issue that you're dealing with, and you may need the information. So we just need to talk after the break about what types of information that is.
All right.
Okay? Okay.
Cool.
So how's it going? Bye.
Yeah,
Good. You're doing good.
thank you.
So what type of, so are a lot of organizations like Black Lives Matter and stuff like that, are they coming to get FOIA stuff? No?
I mean, I know that Black Lives Matter members have made FOIAs, and other activists have made FOIAs looking for information about themselves. There's a group called the Lucy Parsons Lab that does a lot of work about police accountability. I don't know exactly what the scope of Black Lives Matter's FOIA work is. I'd be very surprised if they weren't doing some of it. I'm not their attorney, so I can't.
No, I know that, but I'm just saying, so if I wanted to, as an individual, if I said, let me see if the government is tracking Elizabeth,
Yeah.
I have the opportunity to say, I want information, all the information that you have gathered about me.
Yeah. You can, it's used a lot for development too. Like if you're thinking about buying a property, you might want to look up any zoning variances on the address, or you might want to look up inspection history. And a lot of the stuff, the city has a whole lot of information available already.
I see. I mean, I would expect that, with the zoning and everything. Yeah, I would see that. I've just never done a FOIA request. I've never thought even in my mind of why I would want to do a FOIA request. So I think those issues that you talk about, like with real estate and everything, like, I mean, that's good to know. Cause you know, there's
Let's
people who
talk through a
invest.
sample FOIA right now.
Huh?
Let's talk through a sample FOIA.
Okay, let's do a sample FOIA. That sounds good.
Alright.
So it's gonna be a few minutes.
Okay.
Did you want a cookie or something?
Yes, I'm comfortable. Thank you. How long have you been doing the show?
I have been doing this radio show since March. I started doing Miss Esquire in general, what is it, 2011? And so we were doing, it on Can TV, and when I say we, it's Kelly. She's the producer who writes the script and everything, and finds out information.
Yeah, I need to update
in
my
the
LinkedIn.
script. She was with me, and then I had a co-host. There was a co-host, Jennifer.
Are we still
And
on here?
we're still on here, yeah.
Can they
These are
hear
like
us?
the side, yeah, they can hear us. So we started on Can TV, like back then in 2011.
Yeah.
And so it was a co-host, and we were on TV.
Yeah.
And then this year I found out about, why not do it on radio?
Yeah.
And my co-host, she ended up moving to LA, and she's doing some great things, with AfterBuzz TV. Well, they do like, welcome back to the Miss Esquire radio show on Urban Broadcast Media. We have Daniel, I know this, don't say it, Masolia.
Very close.
Masolia.
Good. Good.
I was like, Masolia, that's, I have to just keep saying it, because out of respect, I always want to know people's names and be able to pronounce it. And my husband's always like, why are you chopping, no, it's like seriously, like when he listens, he's like, why are you chopping up everybody's name? I said, because I'm determined to be able to pronounce it and to be able to pronounce it correctly. Taking that time out.
I appreciate
Okay,
it.
and so we're talking about privacy law. So what we decided to do, because on the short commercial break, well, some of you, if you're tuning in, of course, to YouTube Live, may have heard the conversation. But even for me, I'm an attorney, okay? I don't know it all. I don't know everything that falls under the law, every practice area. And I've never thought to myself, why would I make a FOIA request? And FOIA is just a short term for Freedom of Information Act. So when you hear people say FOIA, because I used to hear FOIA, and I'm like, what is FOIA? So what we decided to do is to help you understand your rights when it comes to FOIA, obtaining information under the Freedom of Information
So we're gonna
Act.
make a request.
Yes, so we're gonna make a request. We're gonna determine what it is we're trying to request, right?
I don't
Because I think we were talking about this, because I was like, what would I want to request? Like from the information, and you had mentioned something like if you're a real estate investor, or you're about to purchase a property, you may want to find out information related to zone variances.
Maybe you wanna see what the communication is among aldermen about the $95 million cop academy that has been proposed for the west side. Maybe,
Wow.
maybe you wanna see information, what's going on there.
Yeah, and see, those things, I see, like, I know there was this recent thing about the cop academy where Chance the Rapper was at the city council meeting.
You are.
And he was being very vocal on the fact that, look, we have all this money for this cop academy, yet we say we're broke.
Mhm.
Shouldn't we be able to divert that? I had no idea that I could go and say, well, let me find out information related to that deal, to the communications related to the cop academy.
So what you might do is you might send a request to the city and ask for the communications between 3 aldermen that include the hashtag No Cop Academy, to see if people were talking about the opposition to the sale of this land to build this monstrous training facility.
Oh, wow. Okay, so what's the process? So now I just put in a written request.
So we'll send this to the Department of Innovation and Technology,
Okay.
and we'll say, Dear Yolanda, or to whom it may concern, Yolanda, forgot her last name, was their officer there, but to whom it may concern, this is a Freedom of Information Act request under 5 ILCS 140. Please provide, this request is in the public interest, it's not for commercial purposes.
Okay.
Please provide information between, pick your alderman, like 3 aldermen.
Okay, so, God, the Alderman, Fear Ready, is he
Fear
Alderman?
ready. It's like
Okay.
Joe Moore.
Moore,
And
and what's the other one that they were saying that there was an issue, not Rodoliak, what's the,
Poir?
there was some issue between, somebody's trying to do something for Trump Tower, he's an alderman.
Oh, I don't know.
Okay, go ahead, go with those seven. you have.
Whoever that is. What added the Trump Tower guy?
Sophia King.
Okay, Sophia King.
Okay, Sophia King.
Sophia King.
So
So,
she's an alderman.
to make a concern, emails, including Bob Fioretti, Joe Moore, Sophia King, that include the following terms. And then we would decide, or you would decide, what phrases you want to look for and on what time frame to try to get the information that you're after.
So you said I'm thinking of phrases? I can't just say, seeing whether they're discussing the cop academy?
You can, and they'll probably say, we need more specifics.
Oh, okay, so that's why you would say like hashtag no cop.
Hashtag no cop academy, or maybe the address of the property that was being purchased.
Mm-hmm,
We could say like the week of that vote.
mm-hmm,
So we'll, pencil in week of the vote, say address, property,
mm-hmm,
and then hashtag no cop academy.
mm-hmm.
Write it up, send it an email, and you can send it yourself, you can send it through council, but it's totally free to send. You don't have to, you don't have to provide any information, you don't even have to give your name if you don't want to.
Okay, but where are you telling them to send the information to?
Well, every City of Chicago department will have a email address associated with their FOIA officer. And so this is something you can find on the city's website. If you do a quick search, the mayor is mofoia@cityofchicago.org, for
Okay.
example. I think the place where we're gonna send this is doitfoia@cityofchicago.org.
Okay,
But it's easy information if you look up Chicago FOIA. There's gonna be a wealth of information on the city's website to help you, begin putting together a request. And, it's like, you don't have much to lose. Let me know if you can think of, there are some downsides to sending one, but like, you don't have much to lose, sending a request, because the worst thing that happens is it gets denied, doesn't cost you anything to send it,
okay,
and then you try again if you want to, or give up if you want to,
okay,
totally up to you.
okay. And so I send the request, I could be anonymous, but they have to send the information back to me. So am I getting actual documents mailed to me?
It's a great point. One thing you wanna do is make sure you ask for the documents in the format that you want them. So if you're gonna make a FOIA, you wanna say, I'd like this in PDFs, so you
Okay.
don't get a big stack of papers.
Okay,
Or I'd like this in, spreadsheets, or I'd like this electronically,
Okay.
something like that. And so we'll add that to our little sample FOIA request here.
okay, so I can tell them how I want my documents sent to me.
Mhm.
They have 20 days?
They have 5 days, 5 business days.
Okay, 5 business days to get us back the information, and those people who are just tuning in, to Miss Esquire on UBM Radio, we're here with Daniel, and he's telling us how the process of, the process under FOIA.
The process under Illinois FOIA to get information from elected representatives
Right,
in Chicago and elsewhere, and then the general operations of government, like the public bodies is what they're called, anywhere in the state of Illinois.
okay, and so that's had,
We send our email,
we send our email, and then we receive it.
and then 5 days later they say, here's your information, or they say, this is too broad, you need to make it more narrow,
Okay,
or they say, we need a little bit more time, give us 5 days to extend this.
okay,
And then at that point, you have a litigation question or a negotiation question. Say, am I gonna try to work with this response, or am I gonna file a lawsuit
because I should be able to get this.
in the circuit court, because I should be able to get this information, right? And
That was the issue, now that I'm thinking about it, that was the issue
generally you
about.
don't sue immediately. You wanna wait a little bit, give them a couple chances.
Right,
take
exactly.
some time.
Yeah, you do, and then, but that's what people hire you for, so that's what you get, you would hire an attorney like yourself,
Yeah.
In order, if you tried to do it yourself, you weren't able to obtain it, then at that point, they say it's too broad. You say, okay, I can narrow it and revise it. Or in the alternative, it's not broad, it is limited, I should be able to get it, so now I get to sue on it. So do I have to pay to sue to obtain this information?
Do you have to pay me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, do I have to pay to file something with the court
You
in
don't-
order to get the information? So is there
Well,
filing
I
fees
said-
associated?
I said, yeah, you don't always have to pay me. It depends, if it's.
No. You're an attorney, you're a private practice, we're hustlers, we deserve to get paid too, so that's not the issue. It's just understanding that, this information is free. However, if you're entitled to it and you don't get it, being an individual because you are entitled to this information. It's
Sure.
supposed to be public access, right?
Right.
So if I don't get it, then I can hire an attorney to file it. Now, when I go to the court for filing fees, are there standard filing fees? Like, cause I know if I'm suing somebody, I'm suing them for a value of something, for $10,000 that they owe me. But here I'm saying to the city, I just want this information, I'm entitled to it. So is it a requirement that I pay a filing fee to get information that I am freely entitled to?
It's expensive, the filing fees are expensive, but there's also a good thing about the FOIA statute. So I'll go with the expense first. It's gonna cost you a few $100s, under $500, but could be more than $400
Okay,
to file this lawsuit.
okay,
And there is a provision though that is really friendly to the requester, which is one reason that people can take discounted FOIA cases, attorneys can take discounted FOIA cases, is that if you win, the winning party receives their attorney's fees from the
okay,
agency that didn't follow the law.
okay,
And so you're able to, get paid that way if something that would be very, very expensive, but an attorney can take a case on like a partial, like what can you afford to get this information?
okay.
And then you'll be refunded later if the suit is successful.
Okay, and so with this question, and because we're asking about this, the information that the email, the hashtag No Cop Academy. If I wanted to see how my alderman or alderwoman
Right.
is voting, like what they're voting for, what they're voting against, what the meeting minutes are with respect to these city council meetings. I go to the city of Chicago for that, that's my FOIA request to the city, or can I go directly to the alderman's office and say, I have a FOIA request?
You would go directly to the city clerk
Okay,
or to the Department of Innovation and Technology. And then if you're looking for, a lot of documents are kept publicly that you don't even need FOIA for. So you could probably go to the clerk's website or the city council's website and get a lot of information about legislative sessions and about should-be meeting minutes. There's a related law in Illinois that I'm not as familiar with called the Open Meetings Act.
okay,
But there are requirements, record-keeping requirements present there too, that means that this information should be public without even a FOIA request.
okay. And I'm so happy to have you because we talk about lots of things, like family law and all of this. But I mean, just, at the time, our climate, when it comes to politics and everything, is, we're not in a bad place when it comes politically, with our president and other elected officials. And
We got a whole heap of shit on there.
Exactly. So we have a lot going on and we take it for granted. And I mean, this affects, this information that you can acquire affects how we go to our polls and vote. You know what I mean? So where you don't think it's applicable to yourself, because here myself, I didn't think, why do I need a FOIA request? But now that I am talking to you, Daniel, it's starting to stir in my mind the importance of being able to obtain information to basically guide decisions that's made, whether it's individually or as an organization.
And that's the rationale of the law, is
Yeah.
that public information belongs to the public, that government operates better when more transparency is available.
Yes.
And that, every person has a right to this information and that it should be public if someone needs it.
Okay, so that's good to know. Okay, so I think, we may end up going back to short commercial break. Are we going back to the short commercial break? Or are we just continuing? A 2-minute break? Okay, so we're gonna go back for a 2-minute commercial break and we'll be right back.
You want to get into privacy?
Yeah,
Yeah.
it goes by so fast.
Just a line by.
Yeah, well, but that was
Where's-
good. That was very good information. I
We're
mean,
sending this.
Huh?
You wanna send this?
Say what?
This request, we're sending this, right?
No, we were just playing.
Oh, you don't want to actually?
Well, you know what? I would like to send it. See what we get.
Okay. Sophia, can you be ready more, say the week of the vote?
Yeah, now, I know Sophia King is my alderwoman, so I would like to see how she's, her opinion on it.
20 and 40 after hours. You were 5 minutes early. That's it. But the.
Oh, okay, I didn't realize that.
No, with the-
I was
with
a bit
the-
sorry.
Give me a signal from Ms. Victorious.
Oh, so, okay, so do the, okay, so start, wait, let me see, Misfit is 3:40.
Do
You
it.
said 2 minutes.
Oh, yeah, got about 2 minutes worth of commercials and then.
You know what, go ahead, do,
Then
just
I'll
go
go
do the
now.
Misfit, just do the Misfit, and then we'll go back
Sure.
to some other things. It goes back so fast. Nowhere to cover though.
What's most important to you to get out there?
I think they need to know maybe the cookies
Okay.
and the private policy statement. Cause a lot of people are like business owners.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we'll talk about that. We're gonna go on to the FTC. You deal with the FTC a lot? Not really,
I mean,
right?
academically, but
Yeah, okay, we're gonna cut that one.
FTC is like the big guns and federal.
But you,
guns
but,
and
okay,
everything.
so when you say internet, like you deal with the internet, is it the internet law, the internet behind the law, I mean, the laws behind the internet? And
Yeah.
how e-commerce and all of that?
Not that much, I mean, like,
So it's internet privacy?
mostly internet privacy, mostly with a focus on the government,
Oh, okay.
but like, I can, like, in a pinch, I could tell your business something, but, I'm mostly.
Cause then after that, we're going to just your personal interest.
Well, my personal interest is boring. This is my personal interest.
I can tell. And you're so young.
I'm 28.
Yeah, and you're just like, I mean, like, you're like an old soul.
Oh.
You're like, this is my interest.
It is.
Okay.
So your question is.
I think I want that other alderman, the one here, cause I'm in the fourth ward, but there's another one here.
Harrison, is it?
Harrison, Leslie Harrison.
She's gonna be mad at me.
You know Leslie Harrison. But why would they be upset? But you know what you were just saying? I would like to see how they vote, period. So I would probably could just go to the clerk's office, that website, and
Yeah.
see the minutes. Because I just think that,
50 to nothing is how they voted.
for what?
To sell the land, to authorize the sale of the land.
Even though we don't have any money,
Yeah,
they all voted for it?
everybody. Every last cowardly one.
Wait a minute. We're selling the land and the cops are paying, I mean,
No, the city is spending more money on the police department. $95 million more dollars
so we're trying to buy land,
in order to
build a cop academy,
Yeah,
even though we don't have any money.
yeah.
But nobody raised the issue of, that's a lot of money and our Chicago public schools are at a brink of,
Yeah, I don't think so.
none of the
I mean,
aldermen.
activists did. A couple of aldermen made some small noises about it, but didn't vote in line.
I think we
with
need to talk about
that. Let's talk about it. I'm not an expert.
I'm just saying, like, how did you find out about the 50, were you at the city council meeting?
No, I had some friends were there
But there was a vote.
for the sale of it. Yeah.
Welcome to the island of the Misfit Lawyers. It's been a while since we visited the island. The island is where we get to know the non-legal side of lawyers. We explore their side gigs, passions, and quirky interests. Whether it's life as a chocolatier, hot yoga teacher, or reality TV junkie, what happens on the island stays on the island. Welcome to the island, Daniel.
You know, it's funny that you mentioned that because I actually was on a reality TV show about chocolatiering on tropical islands.
Really?
No.
Say, are you a chocolatier too? Cause we had a chocolatier who came in, she's a Harvard Law School grad.
She makes chocolate.
And she makes chocolate. No, she doesn't make the chocolate. No, she purchases free trade chocolate and then she sells it. So she has a subscription box for these different chocolates that she acquires. In addition to that, she started these chocolate tours.
Mhm.
Now, because she was the initial starter of the chocolate tours in like downtown, so it would take you to different chocolate shops and tell you about the different chocolates and
That is a
everything.
great idea.
Yeah, it was awesome, but there's some issues because now it's one of those markets that's kind of being infiltrated, and then it, they may not provide the services as superior as this particular chocolatier. So, she just now does private tours, so you just have to do it in order to have private tours. So yeah, we've had chocolatiers here and hot yoga teachers and.
My interests are boring, Liz.
No, but no, you say your interests are boring, but I saw something about you, and we'll talk about that. But first, I'm finding this topic to be interesting, with this, for you and everything. So I wanted to know, because it's one thing to watch the news and to see Chance the Rapper at the city council meetings. That kind of enlightened me because I know I can participate in the city council meetings. I think I was present at a city council meeting years ago, and I can't remember why. It was a vote on something, but I don't know why I was there, but it was a vote. Oh, I know what it was. It was my daughter's elementary school, and the school, there was a funeral home next to the school, but the funeral home wanted to sell the property to a halfway house. And the issue was, do you have a halfway house right across the street from an elementary, like it was literally across the street
It's
from
always
the.
tough to find places.
Yes, and you want to do a halfway house, but how close do you put a halfway house with, particularly it was men 18 years and older, next to an elementary school? Well, right across the street, literally, from an elementary school. So I remember that was the issue that I went for, because I was against it.
What happened?
They ended up not being able to sell the property to the halfway house. Because there's so many properties throughout the south side of Chicago where they could put a halfway house in a residential neighborhood. Now this is residential, and then you have the school there, but it was literally directly. So when the kids come out of school or they're in the playground, you have these other people from the halfway house who are getting rehabilitation, they're coming back into society, and they're saying, we want to be a part of society, and they're more than welcome to be a part of society. But we didn't want them there, right at that particular location, yeah. So it ended up being one of those things where they did not get that piece of land, they couldn't sell it to the halfway house.
So was your experience with the city council positive?
You know what, I was just there listening, I wasn't even active. I'm always rushing, so I'm always moving, like going here, going there, doing this. So I never took the opportunity to really focus on what's going on. And then I get, you get so busy with life that I'm not really paying attention to things that are beneficial. Like who you vote for, what stances are they taking, what decisions are they making. So I had asked you the question during our commercial break about what was the vote. Do you understand? Like I saw it on TV, but I never even took the step to say what was the vote. How did they vote when it came to that Cop Academy and purchasing this land? Even though we don't have, my kids go to Chicago Public Schools. I am a product of Chicago Public Schools. Our school is suffering. Everything is unpredictable at this time. Great teachers are leaving for more stabilities in the suburbs when it comes to teaching opportunities. So we're literally losing people, and every year we don't know what to expect. So when Chance the Rapper stands there and says, look, you say we don't have the money, but how are you doing this new Cop Academy? It's kind of like, it opens your mind, but I never knew what the vote was. What was the vote?
The vote was 50-0, and it was for to authorize the purchase of the land.
For the city to take its money to purchase the land.
And I don't know how much that was. I think the 95 million numbers, it includes like a lot of different stuff. But I don't think that the issue is totally over yet. I believe there's a committee meeting that relates to another issue, another authorization that they need. And I'll probably have to go before the Chicago Plan Commission too.
Okay.
But don't quote me on that. I'm not an expert on that.
Okay, it's not fine. It's fine. But I mean, this all goes into my FOIA. So if I decided I want to find out the information.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can find out the information. And then you were saying during the commercial break that if you want this information, like if I wanna see meeting minutes, I wanna see how my alder person, and I say person because I know sometimes it's a woman, you know,
Person,
yeah. So sometimes I don't just say alderman, I say alder person, but, I have Sophia King, you know, in my ward, the 4th ward. So I would like to know what I know. If it's 50-0, she voted a part of the 50 to do it.
Yeah,
Yeah, so I would like to know the track record behind it. So you were talking about if we wanna get access to meeting minutes, that we don't necessarily have to do such a formal request under FOIA, we can actually possibly go to the clerk's website
That's
to
right.
see the meeting.
that's right. Yeah, there's a whole lot of information available online.
Okay, yeah, and we all need to take advantage of this information, because we need to use it as our guide to see whether people who are supposed to be acting in our best interest and taking care of us as their constituents are voting in the best interest of the Chicagoans that they're representing, at the minimum. So, I'm so happy that you're here, because I always think of like, oh, for the business owner, how does the privacy law affect the business owner?
Mhm.
But how does the privacy laws and these freedom of information affect all of us, be it individual or organization?
Well, it affects, privacy law is sort of a hodgepodge of different components, but one that's common across different, you know, segments of the economy or different parts of a city or different, you know, individuals or different situations, is that there are a few things that we have agreed, and I say we in the sense of not having a better word, but there
Mhm.
are agreements in place that, for example, having the right to be left alone is something that we as a society value. And that if
Mhm.
you would like to be left alone, that is a right that you can enforce in court. And that's something that can implicate a business's interests
Mhm.
if they are, you know, doing something that someone believes is invasive
Mhm.
into their seclusion, something that is gonna affect an individual, just like person to person, if someone's being, you know, not left alone, essentially. That is the foundation, I would say, of American privacy law,
Mhm.
is the idea of the right to be left alone. And the way that this plays out in public and in courts is sort of dependent on how much money is involved, whether the people have access to attorneys, whether somebody wants to go to court to settle something, or whether they wanna try to settle it privately, or so let's say somebody has a question that your producer gave me, which is that, and I forgot his name, I feel very bad, or her name.
Kelly Fox?
Kelly Fox.
Yeah.
One of her questions.
Yeah.
Which is that, what do you do if somebody has taken a photo that you posted online and is misusing it? Maybe it's a photo of your kid, maybe it's not.
Right.
And so the answer to that is you can do a few things. You can say, if they're using it to sell something, you can sue them for misappropriation of likeness.
Okay.
If they're using it though, just generally, they posted it somewhere and you want it down, you can use the Digital Millennium Copyright Act and just send a takedown notice because you have a copyright in that photo. So you can assert your intellectual property rights, or you can assert your privacy rights. There's a lot of end runs around privacy. And so a weird outcome of this is that the Federal Trade Commission, which is supposed to regulate unfair business practices, has emerged as the premier regulator of privacy in the United States.
Okay.
And so a lot of times when you see like privacy issues getting litigated and settled and enforced against large companies like Google or Facebook, it is the FTC that is doing this under the mantle of unfair competition, or under the mantle of unfair business practices. And in Illinois, to reference another one of Kelly's questions, there is a Unfair and Deceptive Business Practices Act that you can look through. You know, if you Google Illinois Unfair Business Practices Act, you'll see a list of things that the legislature specifically said are not okay for a business to do. If your business is doing something like faxing or sending electronically advertisements for the business, there's a law called the Telephone Consumer Protection Act, or the TCPA. I might have gotten those words wrong, but the takeaway is that if you're gonna be mass sending out, advertisements to people, you have to include some pretty specific language saying, this is an advertisement,
Yes.
this is how you get out,
Yes.
this is how you opt out of it. There's something called the Can Spam Act, which will apply to some emails, and it contains a similar notice and reporting requirement, or notice requirement. And, these are things that, because the United States does not have a centralized privacy regime, there's not a real easy way of finding the answers to. But there's a lot of good free resources available online.
Okay, to kind of direct and steer people.
Yeah.
Because I know when you say that, because I know now if you do something through any of the social media sites and it's a form of advertising, you have to say sponsored or
Right, that's
this
been
is
a big
advertising.
issue lately.
Yeah.
I don't know how that's gonna play out. Do you think the Instagram celebrities will be tagging their posts appropriately?
Well, they have. I've seen some, since it's all been brought out and brought to people's attention, I've seen where they now do ad, or you know what I
Yeah.
mean, the hashtag ad,
Yeah.
or a hashtag advertisement, or
Right.
just so they're saying, because they're promoting something, so they may have the sugar peels for your hair or whatever, and they actually are putting, when they describe it, they put ad.
And so it sort of relates to a big concept in a lot of privacy law, which is the twin ideas of reputation and publicity. And so a lot of the law that's available to someone who wants to protect their privacy is concerned with whether they are publicizing information about themselves in a way that is, in a way that they have some kind of ownership over, a sense of control over. Which goes back to that right to be left alone. Like,
Right.
I want to be left alone, and if I want to be made public, I want to be made public on my own terms. And then you have,
Exactly, and you wanna be made public on your own terms, but it's not really on our own terms, especially like Facebook.
a lot of times it's not.
It's not on our own terms.
Yeah, I was listening to a podcast earlier that says that, what Facebook sells is not so much data, but it sells eyeballs, and it's
Right.
they have information about us that is very valuable to a lot of other entities and organizations.
Well, we didn't get a chance to talk about your other interests, like, you're such an old soul, like you know what I
That's what
mean?
you
You're
said.
young, but you're an old soul, so when you think of Freedom of Information Act, that's so serious, you think of the.
I love it.
Yeah, so it's awesome, so we're getting to the end of the show, but this old soul has tattoo, loves dogs, you know what I
I
mean?
love dogs. I'm an Aquarius. I got a tattoo of a sailboat on
Oh my, oh, you're in the other private
a
area.
tattoo of a sailboat that is not visible when I'm wearing a suit.
Okay, it makes you fun.
I'm from North Carolina.
In North Carolina, and I went to school in North Carolina,
Oh, did you?
undergrad, St. Augustine's College in Raleigh, North Carolina.
No joke.
St. Aug, HBCU, all the way. So we are getting to the end of the show. It has been fun with you. It's been fun having you here, very informative, and so we thank you for that. Well, our time is up for today. We must thank Attorney Daniel Masolia. Yes, Masolia, for coming on the show to share his expertise on privacy law and learning more about his passions outside the law. We didn't really get all into it, but we know that you have another side with those tattoos, that sailboat. Thank you for joining us. Come back anytime. As always, thank you for our producer, Kelly Fox. We miss you, Kelly. Kelly has lots of birthday parties she's attended today with her little ones. And UBM engineer D. Curtis Randall. Randall also has a show. For Mr. D. For all you do to make the show a success. Thank you for listening to the Miss Esquire radio show on Urban Broadcast Media. Be sure to like the show on Facebook, follow us on Twitter, and visit the MissEsquire.net website. If you'd like to be a guest or a sponsor, please leave a note on MissEsquire.net or on the Miss Esquire radio show Facebook page. Stay warm and dry, Chicago. Until next time, bye.